Tape him a bit later to give him a welcome. Make sure you do a good job on that, won't you? Because he's suffered for Jesus to get here. I just want you to know that. If you're on a little plane and it's going up and down a lot. And his wife, God willing, will get back in it again on the way home. Hour and a half from Dubbo. Short way it is. Otherwise, it's a 10-hour trip, so he's done well. What else have I got to mention? A couple of things I want to mention. Andrew sends his apologies today. He would normally be standing up here, but... his two children got into the grand final. His two boys, twin boys, got into the grand final. That's on being played right at this very moment of time, and he also manages the team. So we gave him a pass. I think that's legitimate. He's actually being a good father today, modelling for us men how to love our kids. So that's why we're giving him a bit of a pass today. Some things I need to mention. This one here is the Reconnected Man. If you haven't done that, you need to do it. So many men have been really blessed in our church through it. If you have done it, there's another one that says, come follow me. Two great courses. Look, there's something great about getting together, man. I'm seeing the change that's happening in guys' lives in this church through doing these courses and just getting together with other men. And I see it constantly, actually. And so if you haven't done some of this stuff, I want to really encourage you to do it. It's good for our souls and it's good for our families. It really is. And if you're one of those people who, decides at the last minute to do something, well, the course starts next week. So this week. No, 8th. 8th. When's that, Tony? Next week. Well, perfect timing. That's the perfect timing for you to hear about a course when it's about to start the next week, men. So lock in. If you haven't, be a great opportunity to do that. The men's shed is the other thing. If you're here normally, if you don't normally come to men's shed, I just want to invite you to come to that too as well. They are terrific nights. Brilliant. Tony, who's doing the interview this morning, looks after them, coordinates them all, and it's fascinating and powerful to hear what God's doing. I'm bearing Paul MacArthur next week, I think, and he had such an impact through some of the things actually shared in men's shed. And I want to really encourage you to keep coming. They're good nights to get together. Really, really great nights. What else have we got? Here we are. I better not talk too long because we want to get to the main guy. That is the main guy. We're up to you. Peter, I'm going to introduce you. Yeah, this is Peter Gibbs, Gamilaroi man, CEO of Regional Enterprise Development Institute. Sounds impressive, Peter, and it is. It's making a difference in our nation. We're going to hear. I'm not going to say too much about Peter because Tony's going to tease it all out, and it's going to be terrific this morning. And we first heard about Peter, actually, when Carl Faze came up here and shared a little bit of The Faith Runs Deep. And this man is chapter 10 in that book. If you haven't got the anthology, it's a very powerful set of stories in our nation. So Peter's one of those, and we're going to hear some of the reason why he's in that particular book. Some of the changes that God's brought about in his life is absolutely incredible. So I think we won't say too much more from me this morning, except Peter and Tony as they come up. Come up, men, you've got to go the long way round, unless... go the long way around. We don't want him to have an accident. He's big, actually. Have you noticed how big he is? He's a really big sucker, I've got to tell you that. I would have hated to tackle him back there in the old days on the football field. So it's good. Here he is. This is Peter Gibbs, guys, coming in. Let's do a really good. This is Queensland. He's from New South Wales, I know. We love him, but we love you, Peter. Real good. And got some good stuff for us. And Tony. Thanks, mate. Great.
Good morning, Peter. Really good to have you here, mate. And yes, you are a 6'4" unit. You said you were 6'4" on the phone, and I thought, 6'4" is a little bit taller than me, but actually it's quite a lot taller than me.
Well, I saw the shack on TV the other night, and 6'4" beside the shack would be something. And I want to meet that guy. I want to look up.
Oh, you're talking about Shaquille O'Neal?
Yeah, he's in Australia, and he's doing some promotion around... doing some promotion around The Voice. And I don't know if anybody saw a vision of him, but he was shaking hands to the Prime Minister the other night. And I don't know what the Prime Minister was standing on, but the shack was sitting down and he was still looking up.
Mate, just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your occupation, how old you are, mate, your family status, what you get up to in your week, your normal week?
Yes. So my name's Peter Gibbs, and that might not mean anything, and it probably doesn't. But I've got this great job. I've got this great job helping Aboriginal people in Western New South Wales. So when you work in the field and people would know this and identify with it, when you're doing something you love, you don't do a day's work. And that is literally how I feel. I get up every day to go out and help Aboriginal people overcome some of their disadvantage in their remote communities. And I just love that. And it's just the time of my life to be motivated. I've got a family that are number one. I've got 5 daughters and a 6'4" son who's 19. So there's a lot of work in that. Yeah. Who's got 5 daughters? I'd rather have 5 sons. Oh, yeah, I'll say that because we're going to keep that between ourselves. Just look after me.
Peter, important question, mate. Who's taller, you or your son?
I think he's got me right now. In fact, my dad is not well at the moment, and he came over. Dad lives about 2 or 3 hours away from us, and he's having some struggles, so he comes to Dubbo in the last 24 hours to see us. And he hadn't seen my son for 2 years. And that was literally a really, really lovely moment to be there. And he looked up at my son. He just looked up at him. They are the things we should never, ever discount. The time with our boys, the time with our pops. Don't waste our time anymore. And my dad hadn't seen him for 2 years. And he has just shot up from this, because we call him Little Dan. He's not little anymore.
Can you tell us just briefly a little bit about what you do in your daily job? You're CEO, so it's no small task you've got. Ready's the organisation. Yeah, just give the fellas a bit of an idea of what Ready does and what you do.
So I'm not a boots under the table CEO. I'm a very operational CEO. I come from a shearing background as well as a football background. So we do like action. And men, we're built for hard work. And I've been raised in hard work. So when I became CEO, I wanted to keep that as intrinsic in my life every day. So I could be literally out with our shearing team. So we started our own shearing business. I'm out there with them. I could be painting with another team. We have a small construction team that goes out and fixes some of our properties and others. So I could be out with them. Or I could be talking to politicians, and I could be, writing reports and doing all the administration responsibilities. But the thing that I love the most about my work is I'm going out there and sitting down with the leaders in their communities, hearing their stories, sitting down and listening. And that's the best part of my job, is listening, sitting down and clearly understanding what it is and how it is things should be done in their community.
Yeah, what's the vision statement for Ready, Peter?
It's basically to assist Aboriginal people to overcome their disadvantage in their communities. We need our people to stay in their communities. We need our young people to stay there. We won't have a community if we don't. We need them to stay, but we've got to give them hope. We can't have a community where its hopelessness reigns. And Satan has come to steal, kill and destroy. And it's my responsibility as the CEO of Ready and as a Christian man to carry that with seriousness. And I take it absolutely serious, because it is my responsibility, not somebody else's. I can't pass the football to somebody else, literally. I have to take on that responsibility and lead a team. I employ 60-odd people, but we look after thousands. Every day we have a responsibility for the most remote communities in Western New South Wales, and you'll hear a bit more about them later.
Yeah. Mate, what gets you fired up? What are you passionate about?
Absolutely passionate about my community. There's nothing fires me up more than my community, assisting my community in whatever way I can. I love rugby league. Put up your hand if you love rugby league. And I know you're all Roosters supporters as well, so I won't bother asking you the other question.
Can we talk briefly, what does life look like when you're not working and family? What hobbies have you got? What do you like to do in your spare time?
I love mowing lawns. I love mowing lawns for other people. My wife and I, and you'll meet her tomorrow, she's not too big. She's certainly not 6'4", I'm glad she isn't. But we love mowing lawns for other people. And we've done all sorts of stuff. This is not big noting, this is just literally what our hobbies are. And she thought I was crazy too. But I said, let's start helping people in our community in the way that I like helping people. I love brother. Now there's a young brother from my country right there in the 4th row back. Bless you, my brother. This is unbelievable. We love helping people. Just a few weeks back, we mowed a lawn and we found a trampoline in the backyard. This is...
Mate, sorry, how do you find a trampoline in someone's backyard?
Well, you grab a mower, you start mowing, and then all of a sudden you go boom, and then there's something there. And I'll tell you, we literally found a trampoline. And you know what I found after the 3 hours or 4 hours of mowing? A little girl comes out the backyard. A little girl, it was his granddaughter, and she was jumping on that trampoline. And she was saying to her, Pop, watch me. Pop, watch me, Pop. That's what she was saying to her, Pop. That is why we love mowing lawns. Not because I love to see grass fall. I want to help people. And I think that's what God has done for me. He's helped me to use what I like to do and what men like to do. We like to be physical. We like to get some hard work. We like to do the, sweat. And then we can use that for the right reasons. And the other good thing is, at the bottom end of that is, they'll say, but we don't have any money. No, we don't charge anything. Is that a crazy thing to do? It's not. And I think it's the next door neighbour, it's doing it for our own families, our nan and pops who sometimes don't have the capability. It's other people who don't have. What can we do? And I think as a community, we can take that responsibility. I don't think it's an obligation. It's just something that we can just do. And that is my hobby, would you believe? But I also love coaching. Still love the coaching side of rugby league. And so I kept that in my life to have a balance between all the other things. And I got sent off a few times in my rugby league career. So I learned a lot about judiciaries. So now I'm on the judiciary, and it's such a laugh for people who know me out west that you have this character who's now sitting on a judiciary judging others. How about that?
Good, mate. Already, fellas, we're starting to see a bit of the servant heart of Peter, and we love that, mate. You've spoken about responsibility as well, and we're going to touch on what it means to be a responsible man. Let's go back, though. A 9 or 10-year-old Peter. Now, if I'm honest, mate, this is a largely white middle-class community. There's stereotypical comments in there, so just bear with me, fellas. But what I'm trying to say there is a lot of us don't have any idea of what it looks like to be an Indigenous fella growing up in a community out west or wherever it might be. So could you just paint a picture? Where were you as a 9 or 10-year-old boy, and what did it look like?
So I live in Dubbo now, and most people know where Dubbo is, central New South Wales. I think I met a few this morning that we know the zoo's there. But I come from further west, another 5 hours drive west of Dubbo. In fact, I never went to Dubbo until I was a teenager. So west of Dubbo, in a little community, 16 kilometres below the Queensland border. Now, I could have been a Murray. Wilmaringle is the little community. It's a lot closer, if you're a football fanatic, it's a lot closer to Queensland than Tonga or Barraville. I could have been a Queensland State of Origin player, but I would never been able to play for Queensland. My pop wouldn't have allowed that. The interesting thing is we can walk from our little community to the Queensland border, and we did that on many occasions. It's really remote. Still 100 kilometres away from the nearest police station. We don't have a hospital or health centre. We've got a little school that goes to year 6, still does today. We still have our community living there, working in the agricultural industry, which we have done for generations. Shearing is the industry that has sustained us. But as a 9 or 10-year-old growing up in that community, it was the time when a grog started to infiltrate our little community. And if you really want to find out about our life as growing up there, I always say to people now, ask the women and the children, and you'll get the real story. It wasn't utopia. There was so much violence in our little community that my nan, who was responsible for all of us, and it's a big wing of kids, she took responsibility for her own and her grandchildren, and I was the eldest in the grandchildren's line. Many of us were in our nan's room, in her bed, locked in a room. And I find that in my life now so different to the way that I would want my children and my grandchildren to experience. That we love our little communities, we love everyone who lives there, but the life in which we were raised in, I would never ever want anybody to experience that.
Good. Mate, tell us briefly about your dad, what he meant to you, what sort of father was he, and so on.
My dad was a big, strapping bloke. He was a hard-working shearer since he was about 15. He got with Mum when he was 17 and Mum was 16, and that's when I was born. My dad worked for her father, who was a shearing contractor. But that's all the women did in our community. They left at year 6 and became mums. So it wasn't unusual for 16-year-olds to have babies. So I was a product of that generation. Dad was a big, strapping man, as I say. Grog came into his life very young, and he was a very violent man. Very violent man. In fact, Dad and I never had a good relationship. My mum passed away when she was 28. She died of cancer. If you were living in a remote community, even if you're living in a big city, if you strike lung cancer, your chance of living is not too good. But putting yourself in a remote community, 60 mile away from the closest hospital, nobody really too concerned about your life anyway. Mum never really had a chance. And so Dad, when Mum died at 28, we were very small. His drinking become worse. And so he was a lost man in those 2 years. 2 years after Mum died before he got into another relationship. And he and I had a tumultuous relationship up until I became a Christian many years later, and I want to share that with you, that is when things have absolutely changed to the point where now my dad and I were best friends. We are amazing friends. We are just like mates. He rings me every day. If I don't ring him, he rings me. There's so much has happened in our life, just like when he saw my son the other night, that those moments, I'm so happy that I'm alive to be able to see it and have some responsibility. But we have absolutely repaired that relationship.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that a bit soon. You ended up a very talented, very good football player. How does a young fella from out in Whoop Whoop end up playing in the New South Wales Rugby League?
So we come from this little community and we actually live on a clay pan. So we're right on the river and there's a clay pan opposite the river, and that's where the community settled. We built our little football fields there. And the rugby league, way before TVs were in our community, never had electricity, the men would put the footy on the radio of their cars, open the doors, turn the stereo up, and they'd sit around drinking around that radio. And as little kids, we used to listen to the footy on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons, and I can remember the names. Beetson stood out to me, and you could hear all the men talking about Arthur Beetson, how this Aboriginal man from Queensland, he's the best player in the world, and all this. I remember it. And that's what we grew up. So we would run around our cars playing with whatever we could, just play with a shoe, a tin can, whatever you could pick up. And we learned to play like that. So that dream of becoming an Arthur Beetson, way before I even knew what Arthur Beetson looked like, because we only heard his name on the radio, was instilled in me as a very young kid. And so the dream of playing rugby league wherever it was, I wanted to do it. And that got me on this pathway to seeing what I can do and having a dream of playing the game I wanted to, the game I aspired to play.
Yeah. Now, your mum tragically died, and actually, we'll stop at that point. What do you remember about your mum's death? And what do you remember about your mum?
I remember everything. I remember everything about mum's death. I was 11 at the time. I'm 22 now. Mum used to always walk me to school, And my dad was a shearer, as I say, but Mum worked in the administration at the local hospital in a little place called Gadooga. Anybody heard of Gadooga? You've got a couple of hands there. Well, Gadooga was actually well known as the most boring town in the country. Remember that? It was the most boring town. We had 2 tin shacks. We had a tin shack in Gadooga and we had a tin shack at Wellmaringle. And my dad used to shear 6 months there and 6 months there. And so this time we're in Gadooga and Mum used to walk me to school. And she didn't get out of bed this day. And I said, "What's the matter, Mum?" She said, I'm sick, my boy. I'm sick. Will you be able to go to school by yourself today? I said, I was 11. It's not a problem. I said, "No worries, Mum," and I lay with her and I said, What's wrong, Mum?" And she said, "I've got a sickness and it's from smoking." And she said to me, "Son, can you promise me something?" I said, "Yes, Mum." She said, "When you grow up, don't smoke." I've never smoked. I've had a few draws and had a few coughs, and I can understand why Mum didn't want me to smoke. And I'm the only person in my family, the only person who's never smoked in my life. But because my mum told me, don't smoke, she died of lung cancer as a very young woman. I remember everything about my mum. We lived in remote New South Wales. To get her treatment, it was to go to Sydney to Royal North Shore Hospital. At that time, that meant 1 hour in a car on a dirt road. You jump on a train from Brewarrina in Western New South Wales. It's about 8 hours on a train at that time, the old steam train, into Dubbo. Then you get on an overnighter. So you get on at midnight in Dubbo and it goes through the mountains to get to Sydney early hours of the next morning. So it was almost a 2-day trip to see my mum in Royal North Shore Hospital. And we walked in the ward, and because I was 11, they said, "It's Ward 4. I got to Ward 4. I looked in there. That wasn't my mum, so I kept walking. My dad was behind me. He said, son, come back. It's Ward 4. It wasn't my mum. It wasn't my mum. And I remember just laying there with her. And it's just everything had changed. Where's my beautiful mum? And I really wanted to get a photo for you to put up on the big screen, but I just thought probably not the right thing to do because it's about me. But just to show you that our mums are so special. But how often, and I know it's Father's Day tomorrow, but who's given birth to us? And how often we don't show them that level of respect, the continual and persistent and consistent, and we waste time throughout our life, and we could have lots of disputes in our families, and we waste time in not cherishing every moment we can with our lovely mums, because she was taken very young, and it didn't last long after that time when I got to see her in that state, and then we took her home. Sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about, Peter, mate. We really appreciate your vulnerability and just being who you are, being authentic, mate, being an authentic man. Mum passes away. Someone else in your family stepped in and made a family decision which would change your life. As an 11-year-old, you moved from your community. Who was it, and what decision was made there, mate?
My great-grandfather is a man called Jack Orcher. And at Wilmaringle, because we're so far away from authorities, the community ran itself. And Pop, who died at 102, never drank or smoked in his life, raised all of his family through hard work, and tried to instill that discipline in a community that was falling to pieces. Our school went to year 6, but Pop had a vision that the next generation of kids are going to be educated. And at that very time, he made a commitment with the Catholic Church to get our children away to boarding school. Amidst a lot of arguments in the community at the time, but Pop could see devastation coming. It was already there, but in the future it was going to get worse. So to go away to school, which meant more than that 2 days trip, like to see my mum, it was worse than that. But he needed us to get away. As the crow flew, where I went to school was probably a day's crow flying. But when you go by car, bus, and then you finally drive through the big gates of a Catholic school in the Riverina region, it's a long way from Wilmaringle. One day, I was running around with no boots on, shorts, no shirt, snotty nose, chasing birds, fishing. Next day, in a shiny suit, hair cut, tie, ready to go to school. Culture shock, that was a culture shock. But my Pop made sure that our kids were going to be educated, and I bless him for that. And from there, generations of children went through education, became teachers, became leaders in other parts of the community, still sharing as well as we possibly can and where we can, but we've gone on to all other pursuits. And it was because of that, somebody stood up for us, and he made that decision that we were able to benefit as we are today.
Yeah. And mate, it wasn't just education. Your footy skills quickly developed, and you're a young fella and you're grown into your teenage years, and I believe you even represented Australian schoolboys at under 15, is that right?
So, because I went to the Catholic boarding school, I didn't like the school too much, but I loved the footy. Their sport was organised. We got to wear footy boots, and we've got to dress up, and we've got to emulate our heroes. And I can start to see, this aspiration coming to reality. In fact, one of the former students was an Australian player, and lots of schools, they bring old boys back once a year to start talking to the new generation. And they brought that Australian player back, and I got to meet him. And he was talking about all the blokes that I remember hearing about on the radio. Like Arthur Beetson was still synonymous with rugby league, and he was the pinnacle really for league, but he was also synonymous with achievement for our people. Someone who's broke through from where in his life to become the best at the best at what he can be in his sport, and I wanted that. And this former student, his name was Chris Anderson, and Chris Anderson ended up representing Australia. He coached Australia, a very long-term first grade coach in the big league, was a former student, and he came back and they identified me, and I got to then go on from there, and I got to play against this little blonde-headed bloke from Queensland. I think he was about...
Hey, come on, Peter.
But man, he could play. A little bloke by the name of Alan Langer, and he, at his age, when we played against each other at 15 and we made the Australian 15s together, he was just an amazing little player. And I remember, and I was 6'4", possibly. I played fullback, and I couldn't get him most of the time, but when I did get him, I remember doing this job and then letting him go. But if you could get him.
Yes, mate. Under 15 schoolboys, talent identification, and Big Artie Beatson gives you a call and says, would you come to the Roosters? Is that right?
Amazing story, because I don't even know how he got my number. So this is a house call. I literally was outside mowing the lawn. House call, Arthur Beatson's on the phone. Now, do you think, I was living in Burke at the time, in Western New South Wales. Do you think that's a send-up? That's a joke? Someone's having you on? Arthur Beatson's on the phone. Now, what's the likelihood of that happening while you're outside mowing the lawn? So I didn't even worry about that call. I kept mowing. Arthur Beatson's on the phone. You idiot. We have a lot of jokers in our families. Everybody's got them. I didn't take that call. I kept mowing. He literally rang back again, and they said, Arthur Beatson's on the phone. Now, put this into context. I'm going to walk up to the phone, always thinking that it's somebody who's doing a send-up on me. And I have one particular cousin in mind who's just an absolute lunatic for doing these things. I was half expecting that to be him on the other end, but as soon as he spoke, he said, Chicka, it's Artie Beatson here. And not too many people call me Chicka. You have to most people refer to me as Peter, but in my family, that's definitely it. And that was an amazing call. And I think I thought about it for about 5 seconds. I was on the plane next day, and it was a smaller plane than the one I flew in on yesterday as well, but I didn't care at that time, probably the first time I've ever been on a plane, but once it was to go and play under Arthur Beatson, I did what I could, dropped everything, and next day I was at Roosters training.
Yeah, and I think, mate, you actually lived with Arthur Beatson for the first 6 weeks, is that right? And you told me a fantastically funny story the other day about Artie. You've probably got a whole bunch, but can you just share with the lads here Big Artie's story about...
Who knows Arthur Beatson?
Yeah.
Who's ever... Well, we've all seen him, haven't we? And I'd have 2 words for Artie today if I could talk to him, and it would be Jenny Craig. This is what happened. This is true. So I lived with Arthur for 6 weeks as he was acclimatising me to Sydney. He was also talking to me about what I shouldn't get up to and so on. Anyway, he was very big at this time, and he was talking to us about, I was living there with another Torres Strait Island boy as well at the same time. We were living with Artie. And so he was so-called looking after us. Anyway, he's talking to us about how we look after ourselves, even right down to our training and our diets and all these things. Well, this is what happened. He said, "Can you cook breakfast this morning?" I said, "Yes." I said, what do you want me to cook? And he says, "It's in the fridge." So I go to the fridge, open the fridge up. There's 2 packets of Frankfurts in there and a loaf of bread. I put the frankfurts in the pot, boiled the frankfurts, 2 packets of them, made toast out of the full loaf of bread. He ate the lot. That was for breakfast, let me tell you. Me and my mate from the TI, we were over there eating Wheat Bix. He didn't share one with us. They look good too. 2 packets of frankfurts and a loaf of bread toasted just with butter and tomato sauce, and he nailed the lot. Yeah.
Do you know what, Peter? I'm quite wary of time today. We could talk about footy all we want. You spent 2 years at the Roosters, and it was cut short by injury. And then I think you shared the other day when you caught up, you were a young fella in a big city, and after a couple of years you decided to move home. Now, are you going to be available after our chat, if the blokes want to come and talk to you a bit more about your time at the Roosters and so on? Because we could talk for another half an hour just about footy at the Roosters. But there's some significant things in your life that I want to get on to, mate. So yeah, your career after a couple of years at the Roosters, playing top grade footy. I think you said you had 4 broken arms in 2 years, and you're a young Aboriginal boy in a big city, and you said you're a bit lost for who you were, and you made the decision to move back home. Was that an easy or a hard decision at the time?
Very hard decision, because community life had changed back in the bush. No more mum to go home to. Bit lost as a young man. Still wanted to be that rugby league star that I dreamt of. I just signed at the end of the 2-year contract with the Roosters, I signed a 3-year contract, listen to this, a 3-year contract with the Penrith Panthers, and Gus Gould had just transferred to the Panthers, and he was bringing in all these young blokes, all the blokes we now know of as legends, and he was speaking about them as young boys at the time. And he said, you're going to come into a great era at Penrith. I've signed on the line. And then I reneged on that contract. If it's one regret that I'd ever make, it's that one, is knocking back an opportunity to go and play at Penrith. What happened? They win the comp the very next season, and things could have changed. But there was another life waiting for me over the mountains, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, mate. And so you've gone back to your community, and you've always had a heart for your community and your people, even from a young age, which blew me away. And you've gone back into government work and shearing and a few other things. How many committees were you on at one point, mate?
I won this award back in when I was 20. I won this award when I was living in Burke. It was called Junior Citizen of the Year. Junior Citizen of the Year. Well, Junior Citizen of the Year meant that I was on 17 different committees. And I think today we probably... who's probably someone who probably beat that? Is there someone here in the audience? Because we're so busy lives, there's, we find if you want things to happen in your community, you've got to get in there and have a go, and you've got to help start things, whether it's touch footy for our kids, or it's excursions, coaching or the president of your junior league, coaching and president of your senior league, running athletics, doing all sorts of things just to help your community. I just did whatever I could, but that Junior Citizen of the Year is still a little sort of thing that I carry back home, but 17 different committees, I'll never do that again.
And at this stage, where's home? Which town are you in?
When the floods came through in those times when Mum passed away, and we had in those times continual floods in the outback, and our families would get washed out, and then we'd move to places like Brewarrina, Burke, and wherever you can sort of get away from the water. And I think we were sick of doing that, and my dad settled in Brewarrina, and my pop and nan settled in Burke. So I go back home to Burke, to where my nan and pop were.
Yeah, and you described to me the other day when you left the Roosters and went back home, you still felt like a boy, even though you're in a man's body, and you enter into a relationship and you have some children, and you start to become a heavy drinker yourself. Is that right, mate? Is that fair to say? Yep.
I would say this, alcoholic. That's what I would say. Absolute alcoholic. Emulating everything else that was happening in my community. All of my family were heavy drinkers. We did, if someone was born, we have a drink. Someone died, we drink. We celebrate the start of a shed. We celebrate the end of a shed. If we got $5, 4 of it spent on grog. We would do whatever we could to spend all of our money. Most of it was on the grog. And then we'd go out to work. Whatever we earned, we spent on the grog. And our poor old Nan, she was the one left to wrangle together whatever she had to make sure that we were fed. And I have to say, even all through all those years, I'd never missed out on a feed. But I certainly neglected everything, all the responsibilities that I grew up with and the principles that I held in those years. I don't know how someone like our Nans can put up with us.
Yeah. Mate, in 1997, I think it is, if I've got the year right, a really significant event in your life and your family's life, which, again, threw everything on its head. What happened in 1997?
So in 1997, we've all had times in our lives when you come to a crossroad, and we all have tragedy. And in July 1997, this happened to me. I received a phone call at 3 o'clock that afternoon to say that my sister's on life support. She had been locked up for drunkenness in her hometown, Brewarrina, and she was on life support. And for me to get to Dubbo as soon as possible. Now, put this into context. Brewarrina is her own town. It's where she was born. It's where she was raised. She got family on every street corner. If you could imagine whacking a 9-iron from that police station to in any direction, you'd hit a family member. Yet, in the middle of a day, in 1997, nobody should be getting locked up for drunkenness, and now she was on life support. My world come crashing down at that phone call, and the ensuing days was something that I would never wish on anybody.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it was suicide from your younger sister in custody. You certainly carried the weight of that for a long time, but what sort of pressures were you under around that time?
So, I'm the eldest of 4 children, 3 boys, sister. Mum died at 28. My sister is also 28 at this time. She also has 4 children, just like us. Very small little children. If you are the eldest in your family, you know what I'm talking about. There is an extra responsibility on your shoulders. Our family never lived together since Mum passed away. We were raised in all different households. We had never lived back under the one roof as a family. So ultimately, I took responsibility for my sister throughout her growing up into her adult life, and was always, wherever I could, be there for her. And at this point in time, I took extra responsibility because my dad was remarried. We sort of separated a bit, as families do. We are not connected. We're not as supportive of each other as we should be, but this is just what happens. But as the eldest in your family, there is extra responsibility. And so I took on the responsibility for my sister. I was only just early 30s myself, to navigate between the families, navigate between the local community. Because at this point in time, if you have a look at the history, and my little mate there sitting in the 4th row is from Brewarrina, that's his community as well. That's where he comes from. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. In 1987, 10 years before Fiona's death, there was another death in custody in that community. And the outcome from that death in custody was a major riot in the community. And if you logged on to YouTube, when you go home, log on to YouTube and just type in Aboriginal cops in YouTube, and there's a 7 or 8 minute video on there. Just have a look at that, and it'll start to give you a bit of an understanding about what the context of what I'm going to say next. So in 1987, there was a riot after the death in custody. In 1997, I was also offered the same opportunity, 10 years later. So as a family, we were offered to burn Brewarrina to the ground, inverted commas. Starting with the police, working down from there. Every white person that we see on the street, we take them out. That was the opportunity we were given after Fiona's death. We were going to burn the police station to the ground. And my dad and I, we looked the people in the eye and said this: that is not what we want from Fiona's death. There will be peace in this town. We don't want a legacy. We don't want a legacy over the top. We've already got a tragedy. This is a little community we loved. All our family were there. We were born in the hospitals there. And because we were so well respected, our family names were respected. There wasn't a whimper. Wasn't a whimper in that community after her funeral. Not a whimper. At the same time, in another world, this is what was happening. Police were lining up. Police had already arranged a contingent of police officers to take on what could possibly turn out to be another major incident in Brewarrina after another death in custody. I wasn't aware of that for many, many years later, but that's what was happening at this very time. But in our world, we just wanted peace, and we wanted respect for our family, and those people absolutely listened to that, and the rest is now history.
Peter, the word I'm hearing again in all of this is responsibility. There is a man who had an opportunity to stand up and be responsible. It wasn't probably within 18 months, I think you shared the other day, from that time, tragic time, that you find yourself in a car beside the road waiting for a truck to come along, and you were going to suicide yourself. What's going on in Peter Gibbs's mind as you sit in that car waiting for a truck to come along, mate?
At the deepest point in my life was hearing from my family saying that the police had killed your sister. What are you going to do about it? Trying to be a citizen in my community, trying to be the role model, trying to be a person who would stand up for right or wrong, and that is what we all need to do. I couldn't wear the weight of that burden anymore. I was already an alcoholic. By day, a functioning worker, leader, father. But in my quiet time, devastated, broken. And I remember kissing my wife and my 2 little girls. And I made the decision, it was a calculated decision, that I would go out on the highway. And if anybody ever driven from Brisbane to Melbourne, the road I was living on was the Newell Highway, one of the busiest roads in Western New South Wales. And I had calculated that there's a truck that goes past almost every 8 minutes. So I made the decision it would be quite easy. I didn't have the guts to use a knife or a gun or any of those. I thought the truck was my option. Calculated it, made the decision, kissed my wife and 2 girls, and headed off. The Lord intervened. I parked there, no trucks. Where are these trucks? If I'm trying to pull out to go to work, there's trucks everywhere. Where are these trucks? 40 minutes I was sitting there. Well, you know what, a lot could happen in 40 minutes. And that's when my nan was speaking. It was like my nan was speaking with me, saying, son, you are going to be a great leader of your people. I remember her holding my head and telling me close, when I was a boy, you are going to be a great leader. Go away, get educated, come back and help us. I could hear my coach, my football coach, telling me, saying, Pete, you've got to give the grog up, mate. You're so valuable to this community. You've got to give the grog up. And then I could hear my wife telling me how much she loved me. And my little girls, Dad, Daddy. And that's when the Lord spoke with me. And I said this, Lord, I know you're real. I know you're real. Help me. Because I can't carry this burden anymore. And that's why I understand suicide. I understand when you get into that deep and dark place and the depression and the overtaking. So many of my mates, including my football mates, people I've played with, people who've played at the top of the game, choose death over life. Well, I chose life over death, and I made the commitment that night. When I drove back home, I made the commitment that my life is going to change. You know the first words I said to my wife? I think we've all said this before. I'm not going to drink anymore. She said, well, I heard that 1,000 times before. How is this time any different? I've never drank again. It's 25 years ago, praise the Lord.
Peter, can we talk about forgiveness? Because at the root, the seed, if you like, of your struggles and your depression and everything that went after your sister's death in custody, lack of forgiveness was right amongst it, wasn't it? Can you talk about forgiveness and how it affected you and how you've moved past it?
Unforgiveness is just crippling. It is just crippling. It was the same like the burdens of the responsibilities that I held before. When I got to the point of coming to terms with and understanding what forgiveness really means, it's not just a matter of saying sorry. And it's not something that just happens like that. It's a process. I started to read more. I started to talk to people more. I started to find out from others who've got deep-seated unforgiveness and seek out proper counsel, because your mate down the pub is not the counsel. And that's what we do as men. We find a way. If we get to the point, we're not usually that vulnerable and we're not usually that upfront. We don't find that we could just have a deeper conversation. We love the one on the surface. 2 buddies in a pub, 2 buddies in a car, we don't mind that. We keep it to the surface. But when we start to get into the deep stuff, we find that very difficult. Well, I needed to get to the deep-seated side of it. And I found this, that I needed to deal with some very serious issues in my life, and it didn't just relate to police. Then I come to my dad. The unforgiveness I held towards my dad for the violence he inflicted on my mum and the separation of our children, leading to families just going all sorts of directions. I needed to deal with forgiveness for my dad. And then I needed to deal with the forgiveness of New South Wales Police for the mistakes they made, which could have prevented my sister from dying in police custody in her own town. So there's all these things in front of me. So I sorted them out one at a time. Then to my dad. I drove the 3 hours from Dubbo to Bathurst to see my dad. And I said to my dad, I forgive you. Guess what his response was? What did I do? Son, what did I do? I said, Dad, we don't have to go into all the detail. I just want you to know that what I've held towards you, I forgive you. That is like Arthur Beetson getting off my shoulders. The weight I had with how I felt about my dad, with things I could not change. My mum had already passed away. Our kids are grown up. And my dad's just a man. Put up your hand if you've made a few mistakes in your life. I need to come to that understanding. And I held my dad that day. And we cried, obviously. We cried a lot. It was the first time I've seen that old hard man shed a tear since his wife's funeral. He cries more than me now. We're pretty much big sooks. But I think that's okay. I'd rather be shedding tears than throwing punches.
"25 years, mate. 25 years early, you're sitting in a car carrying the weight of the world in your community, a heart full of unforgiveness, about to take your own life, and God intervenes. There's a legacy of people, your grandma, Jack Orcher, your mum, people in your past with Christian faith who've helped you out. You said to me the other day, 3 things you're passionate about: giving young people different options and choices, encouraging men, and you said telling people what the Lord has done for me. So the Peter Gibbs who's sitting in the car waiting to end his life 25 years ago, and the Peter Gibbs before us, can you tell us what the difference is? What's God done in your life? And what's the outcomes of that?
Me even getting the invitation to come and speak with you this morning and be in your presence, just to be able to sit before you and share with you, is the Lord's hand on my life. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and sit with you and just share with you, share with each other as brothers, encourage each other. This is what the Lord has done for me. I could have been just buried in my backyard, back out there, no story, just another black fellow who died young, another black fellow who given up, or someone that the Lord has raised up. And you are going to be a leader in your community. You can share with others, encourage others, so much to contribute. This is what the Lord has done. And the other amazing thing is the softness of my heart today. The softness of my heart. I was a hard-hearted man. I was racist. Because I was bashed as a young boy by the big farmers' boys in the boarding schools. I grew up racist. I thought one day when I get big, I'm going to start throwing punches back. I grew up, I couldn't get jobs because I was black. I got treated pretty badly here, there, everywhere. But it's not everybody else's responsibility to change, it's mine. God has shown me that. My responsibility. You could be that attitude or you could have this one. You can behave like this or you can behave like that. And I chose to do whatever I can. I tell you, do you think I'm perfect? My wife is here tomorrow. If you want to ask her, you can ask her. We are not perfect, guys? None of us. None of us. We have our struggles. We have our vulnerabilities. But God has done so much in my life, and the softness of my heart has been the most amazing thing. And also the gift that I could come and sit up here and talk with you. That is difficult. That I feel very vulnerable. I don't know you. To talk about the abuse I suffered, the issues with my sister, the unforgiveness I have towards police, the barriers and difficulties we have as family. All those things are very difficult. And so God has given me that encouragement, confidence to share with other brothers because we need each other. We need each other. Our families need us. Our wives need husbands. Our children need dads. Our grandchildren need us. They need us to be able to get some wisdom from their pops. And the love and cherish that we have for other brothers. How heartbreaking is it to get news that another brother has taken their life because they felt just like we did and they chose another option. So we have the message that Satan has come to steal, kill and destroy, but he has come to give us life and a life more abundantly. What does that mean? Share it with each other. Please, have a look at that. It is real. We're not just here to exist for a short time and then we go. The light, there is so much we can do, and the light that we can shine in the community, next door neighbours, family and friends, and the wider community. There is so much we can do. And just like mowing the lawns, all those things are just a gift that we can share with others.
Wow, Peter, thanks so much, mate. I've only got one last question for you. And, mate, I tell you, we've barely scratched the surface of Peter's life. So I just want to talk about hope. If there's someone in this audience today, or they may know someone who says, oh, I'm just hopeless. You've been to a point where you've been hopeless before. What would you say to somebody who says, I just don't have any hope?
Christ is the answer. There is no other answer. I have tried all the others. There is not a drug I haven't used and not a liquid I haven't drank to try and burden the pain, try and dumb down the misery and the brokenness. There is nothing like that, and there is no other answer. Let me share with you, brothers, in front of you today, face to face, there is no other answer. No other answer. And the time I put it off for next week, next month, the time is now. And that's what happened in that car that night. My life had changed so much. I can feel without all that burden. I know where to go to. There was no one else that I could run to. And in fact, it was an Aboriginal man, a pastor, who wrote a song called Jesus, You Stop Me From Running. When I heard the words of that song, it was my testimony, because I ran in every other direction until I came to one final conclusion, that I've got to surrender my life to the Lord, and that's what I did 25 years ago.
Peter, I just want to say thank you on behalf of our community and the men here for being vulnerable and being so authentic, and for bringing hope to our lives. Can we all thank Peter Gibbs today?
That's why we get together, man. That's why we do, yeah, for moments like this, yeah. It's incredibly powerful, yeah. I knew it was, I just knew today was, and it's the same with tomorrow. I just knew this was going to be powerful for us. If you don't know Christ, then grab Peter after, Drew. He is the answer. He's the only answer for life. It's true. Yeah. I know a lot of us know that, but there might be some here this morning. You're on that journey. Well, don't go running anywhere else. Don't go running anywhere else. That's what Peter said. Yeah. Peter thanked us for the invite. Peter, I want to thank you, brother, for coming. It's a sacrifice, I know, for you and your wife to come up here, and I do want to really say thank you, brother. And we're looking forward to tomorrow. If you want to come back, if you didn't think you got enough of Peter today, we'll get a bit more tomorrow. Would be terrific. Here tomorrow morning. Actually, I woke this morning, and some of you might use your version, but the verse of the day was this one. 1 Thessalonians 5:15. See that no one pays back evil for evil, but always try to do good to each other and to all people. And I thought, what a ripper of a verse, Peter, for you coming up today and giving us that. Yeah. This is the life Jesus calls us into, man. Yeah. And it can make an incredible difference in our world, our communities, and our families when we live this. Yeah. In His strength. With the brokenness and the mess of our own lives. And Peter spoke about it's true. One of the great things, man, about getting old is you actually become more grace-filled towards others than you've ever had in your entire life. That's what I've found. Actually, you love God more and you love others more as you get older with God. It's incredible. And this is the life He's got for us, man. Yeah. If you don't know Him, man, I really encourage you, come down and talk to Peter this morning. Yeah, he's willing to talk for a while here. I'm going to pray, actually, yeah, let me pray. Yeah, Lord, thanks for your presence here. We've been so conscious of that, Lord. Whose heart hasn't been moved this morning? Yeah. And that's you, Holy Spirit. It's you. You've sent this brother to us here this morning, Lord. Part of your plan to bless us. Wow, what a God, what a good God you are. Thanks for saving Peter, Lord. Yeah. Thank you. He's not in the backyard somewhere, but here he is this morning, Lord. With us, inspiring us, challenging us, encouraging us to live the life which is centered in Jesus Christ, the one who gives the abundant life, And we see it oozing out of Peter here, Lord. That's you. And we want to thank you, Lord. And so, Lord, we're just asking you to lead us on, Lord, individually. We pray that as a community, as people. We've got a nation that desperately needs to hear that Jesus is the answer. It's true, Lord. And we've all got a big responsibility. We felt the weight of the responsibilities Peter's spoken again this morning, Lord. We have. And we want to take that, Lord. Run with it, the call to be men of God. For those here this morning, Lord, that aren't there yet, well, bring them this morning, Lord. Join the community of Jesus Christ. And what a difference, Lord, they'll make in this land of ours, this land of Australia where you've placed us, Lord. So our hearts are full. Our hearts are full this morning, Lord, full of thanksgiving. We're alive and able to hear these words and to know there's a God who loves us, a Saviour that's been sent to pay the penalty of our sin. Yeah. And give us life, and life to the full in Jesus Christ. So thanks, Lord, for the day. You're a great God. You are. There's only one God. It's only you, but you're the best. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Terrific, man. Great to have you all here this morning. If you want to sign up, you want to get into connection with anything, there's a clipboard at the back in the foyer. If your name's not down on the info stuff, you'd be more welcome to get that, to do that this morning. Lock in. Men's Shed's coming up. There's the Reconnected Man stuff too as well. And Pete and some of the other boys, Tony will be down here and some of the other guys from the church will be here. So good for having you here this morning. God bless you, man. Be great.